Imagine a world where communities are swept away by rising seas, violent storms, and uncontrollable wildfires. A world where every year more families lose their homes, their heritage, and their means of survival to force beyond their control. Right now, that's the reality for millions worldwide. From coastal towns facing rising tides and more severe hurricanes and cyclones, to inland areas grappling with unprecedented floods and fires. These events are fueled by climate change. They are reshaping entire landscapes and leaving the most vulnerable communities to bear the heaviest of burdens. We're here today because we cannot ignore the stakes any longer. If we don't act, the consequences will be devastating, especially for marginalized communities and young people who will inherit or already inheriting this increasingly unstable world. But, I got too aggressive then. But there is hope. We have powerful tools at our disposal: climate justice and meaningful action. By listening to the youth voices at the forefront and by ensuring climate finances reaches the communities that need it the most, we can confront not only sea levels rise, but all climate impacts. This panel is about acknowledging those stakes and exploring how we can work together to create solutions that are effective, fair, and just for all. So kulai kinalak eso poiban. Nomen kowi agat. Nu muruzapu aimithin alak na puka poiban. Kapukut mitamuka mura buai. A mura mubagal nu. Nuzunel tish. Nai kuka lag. Masagnu napa. Kuka gal. Zenedith kesnu eso. So my name is Tishko King, and I'm a proud Kukalag woman from Kukagal Nation from a teardrop island called Masig. Which is in the area of the Torres Strait Islands. I'd like to acknowledge, because we are here in the Australian Pavilion, a custom of First Peoples. And so while we may not be on our lands, I would like to acknowledge all traditional custodians of the lands and oceans and skies, which we all meet here for this conversation, and really pay respects to all elders past and Indigenous leaders right across the globe that are here today fighting to protect their country and their communities and protect and regenerate languages and stories. I also want to acknowledge the many footprints that have gone before us and to honor their contributions to culture, community, and protecting our oceans. I do want to shout out to Aka Rose, who's been a big part of Torres Strait Island leadership in our communities, and so to always have an elder in this space is really special. And so I will be moderating today's dialogue. Yes, I love that, Grace. That's what we want. On rising waters, rising voices. And so we're going to unpack hear from incredible leaders about pathways to climate justice and the polycrisis that we are all facing. Today's conversation will weave together our personal connection to our homelands, climate impacts in our communities, intergenerational knowledge and languages that are integral and key to global challenges, and understanding the different tension points for leaders in the global south. Okay, that's enough from me, everyone. Okay, I want to start off with a speaker, introducing all the speakers. So maybe we'll start from Grace. I would love if you can share your name, the nation, country that you come from, your pronouns as well. Great.
Thank you. Ta'ala whakatoa koutou, whaftai Trish, whaftai everyone. My name is Grace Malie, and I am from the beautiful islands of Tuvalu, currently on the forefront of the climate crisis. And I am, sorry, in my country we don't really have pronouns, but I think for now it's she or her. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And thank you for saying that, because some communities don't. And then, so thank you very much. No, don't be sorry. I love that. This is a learning space. This is what we're here for. So it's really great to share that. Mama Lala.
Mayam Debeki Kem Wabim Gairwa. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lala Gachan. I am from Erub Island, the Torres Strait. I'm an Erub Meuram woman, born and raised on my country for 31 years. And my pronoun, I, Gel, he, I wanna, oh, she, yeah, she and her. I'm not used to that, but wow. Yep, thank you.
And Sister Tiana.
Tēnā tātou, tēnā koutou. Hiuria hau no Ngāti Kahungunu ki te wairo, no te whakatōhia no Ngai Tūhoi, ko Tiana tōku ingoa. Hello, my name is Tiana and I come from 3 tribes on the east coast of Aotearoa, New Zealand. Oh, she, her, ia. We don't have pronouns in Māori as well.
Thank you. So I know it's day 2, and I know that everyone is really has been just sort of learning, listening intently. I also know that there's a lot of death, conversations, death by panels, and I know that might be too much of an aggressive word, but I wanted to sort of weave in and share. We're going to start off with personal connection and weave into sort of, I guess, the knowledge and power from all of our leaders. And so I wanted to start with you, Mama Lala. And so just for context, everyone, Mama just means auntie, and so respecting cultural ways, Lala Gutchin is my auntie. And so I really want to start off with, can you share any traditional knowledge or teachings from your community that relate to environmental stewardship or stewardship of how you look after your island home and your ocean?
Okay. Well, as a born and raised islander, we will learn cultural knowledge many ways. So everybody have woman business, man business. So I grew up in a family where gardening, cultivation is still practiced strong in my family. And I am also a fisherman myself. My first hustle was a fisherman. All island girls, we born raised fishermen. So we look at protecting our country in many ways. So we use a lot of our cultural knowledge with getting our food and other things like passing on our traditional knowledge to our children. So I'm a mother. I have a 10-year-old daughter. And my life is based around passing on that cultural knowledge to my daughter and how we use it in our day-to-day lives. So even though I live on my country, I still practice cultural knowledge. My family, one of the last gardeners on my island, we still own 60 native species of bananas. And banana trees are sacred to us island people. From the last conversation we had here from Uncle from Solomon Island mentioned there. So we use it in different ways. So I believe as a First Nation person that the nature only respond to our way of thinking. So I think it's time that all these other things happening around us listen to us first people, because we know the way, because we were with the nature first before anybody else. So that's my I don't know if I get the question right, but I'm trying to think. English is my third language, so just putting it out there. So yeah.
Esther, for that, and I mean, you shared, that relation to sort of bananas is one thing that I know of your relationship to on country, and so maybe and sort of hearing about the impacts of environments that can shape your island home or impact sort of natural spaces on your islands like food, vegetation, and food systems. I want to pass it over to you, Tiana. Through our conversations this year, it's been, your community has actually gone through a lot. And it's not just this year, within the last year. And so I want to bring in talking about how natural events can impact and shape your, your homelands, your mountains, your skies, your rivers. How have recent natural disasters affected your personal life and community's way of life?
Kia ora, Tishi. So I come from a community that in the last 18 months has had 9 catastrophic act of God level climate events. Last year we had 2 cyclones within a month of each other that flooded our house within 13 minutes. My grandmother was helicoptered off our roof, and our marae we had to put to sleep because of the damage, couldn't be repaired. And I think the conversation of how this impacts our people, we say, mā wiwi whenua, mā wiwi tangata. If the land is sick, our people will be sick. And I think to tie it in together, quite often in the climate conversations, First Nations Australians, Torres Strait Islanders, people from Aotearoa, we get left out of the conversation because climate change can't happen in our developed countries, but it does, and it is, and so yeah, that's how it's affected our people.
And I mean, you identified some of, like, I guess, being that, develop, like, Indigenous people in the global south, in developed nations, and some of the challenges that we face. And we'll pop in, we'll go into that conversation a little bit later, but I want to bring in Grace, because Tuvalu has been incredible leaders, both in your, within your party, but civil society. And so, how does your cultural beliefs and practices shape your approach to your advocating for your island home?
Thank you, Trish. And I'm honored to be in this space. And thank you for the opportunity. I was going to sing a fa'atele before I started because as we were talking about what pushes us, what keeps us together in this fight is our communal sense. And I was very blessed, and we all are blessed in the Pacific to have that community sense. If anywhere were to be in danger, if a house, because of a tropical cyclone, was, damaged, everyone in the community comes together and help one another without asking. And I think that's the beauty of being a Pacific Islander. That's the beauty of belonging in the Oceania village. And so knowing that my tupunas, my grandparents and my family and my community and my village are rooting for me back at home. And knowing that I'm in this space because I want to protect, and I want my kids and my nieces and my nephews to have the same opportunity that I was given to grow up in my home with the same communal sense, that pushes me, and I think pushes everyone in this space to continue the fight. Sorry, I'm getting very emotional. I just started. Oh my goodness, what is happening? But yes, it's that community that we bring into this space, and we don't only share it to the Pacific community, we share it with our international brothers and sisters, and we want them to have that same sense so that we have their solidarity. Faftai.
Thank you for sharing that and for being vulnerable in this space, because it's really hard. Like, we in the last panel we talked about the doom and gloom, the importance of active hope, but really, like, the sacrifices it takes when you have to come here in the face of adversity, demanding for transformative change because you are seeing and living with the realities. And so we were talking about this with our young ambassadors this morning about the messages that we've been receiving from families, the phone calls that we're receiving from our children, and the elders that continue to guide us with their wisdom and knowledge that keeps us, their spirits in our hearts. And so I just thank you so much for your mana and love. And, I actually maybe want to pass it back to you, Mama Lola, because it's been an emotional journey for us. I know I'm so proud of your journey and your leadership and your fight for Arab. And so I really want to hearing some of, I guess, those connections. Are there specific stories or traditional practices that guide your community's relationship, with our land and ocean?
Yes, one of that the knowledge that I know for where my people use to guide our ways of protecting our beaches on the island. We have a cultural knowledge that we use where we use bamboo. With my language we call bamboo marep, and we build these bamboo walls. They call kar in my language. And my people build those same walls to stop the southeasterly wind that blows 9 months of the year. But not only that, it builds a mesh. So when the moving sun moves, the beach can erode. And those are the practices that we use to protect our beaches from eating back. So even the sea level rise, that same car you use as a barrier, it comes from my language where I mean a protection, a breaker. For stop what's happening. So my people still use bamboo as what do you call it, materials to build them things. And I'm fortunate that on my island, our low-lying villages, some of our families still practice it. But some days we question it because of the sea level rise, that what if one day the car can't respond to the sea level rise? And because it happened before, the car get smashed and stuff. So those one of our practices that we use for guide us, for protect our low villages. And then for our reef out there on the country, we tell our children not to harvest the big clamshells that we call buggies in my language. The clamshell, we look at it as our ancestors on the reef that guides, because they are the last oxygen for the reef. And when they look after the reef, it tells us to not touch them, to eat them. So we go for the smaller clams. So that's how we use it. We tell our children each animals have their obligations to do, just like us human beings. No matter where you live in this world, whether you're on country or you're out of the country, everybody have duties to protect the country. And that's what our animals do on our reef. So, yeah.
That's right. We have a responsibility to care and look after and protect our natural environment. If we are seeing this, we must act, because there are people that are on the front lines that have been living with this for decades. But we're now in a time where pollution is increasing, and we can't adapt to those changes. We can't use our knowledge systems that we once could use that could help support us, because the changes are too quick. And so maybe I want to pass over to you, Sister Tiana, is maybe, from your communities and from your lens and perspective, what do you think maybe, I'm saying Indigenous perspectives as a general, but maybe Māori, that have perspectives on land, ocean and skies, mountains, rivers, nature differ from mainstream environmental approaches? And I just think about what Mama Lala shared about clams and like they just filter feed. That's traditional knowledge. You, as a marine biologist, Western science is the same thing that keeps our reef systems healthy. So when clams aren't healthy, they can't filter feed, which makes it healthy for the rest of our ecosystem. And so I guess sort of hearing is that the importance of consulting, working together and learning and understanding those, those on the ground and those knowledge systems. And so we'd love if you can share, how that, those approaches in mainstream spaces.
I think in Aotearoa we have a whakaaro for Māori. Ko au ko te awa ko au, ko au ko te whenua ko au. I am the land and the land is me. I am the river and the river is me. So therefore, as Indigenous peoples, we are the physical manifestation of the land fighting for itself. And that right there is the paradox between Indigenous peoples of the land, and mainstream, where we see ourselves interconnected and intrinsically are part of nature, as opposed to people who can extract and take from nature for profit over people. So any solutions that we come up with have to be with all of these things in mind. Because if we think about it, humans are the tainer to creation. We are the youngest sibling to the creation of the world, which means we have an obligation to our natural environment to protect it, to our oceans that we descend from. And because of that, that's how we move and why we move.
And I mean, that's so beautiful to translate it as simply as that. It's like you now see it and you feel it. Now what are we going to do about it? And so I actually want to now shift our conversation to then the kind of work that we kind of do and these incredible young leaders. And I want to come back to you, Grace. And I guess this is actually really pointed for everyone is, what was the turning point or realization that made you decide to actively work towards climate justice? I think people always ask for, what keeps you going, but it's also like our realities of the spaces that we're in. And so, was there a specific experience or moment that really sparked your commitment, that hurt your heart and spirit, that knew you had that obligation and responsibility, knew you had to do something because it was for future generation, or it is for future generations? Sorry, big question. Throw it in.
No. Thank you so much, Chish. I think I started advocating about the impacts of climate change ever since I was about 8 years old.
Wow.
I studied in Fiji. My family was very blessed to be there. So we were there for quite some time. And it was during Library Week. So Library Week in Fiji is when you get to dress as a particular person or character. And I always wanted to be a princess. But my father was very stern, and he said, no, you put on a Tuvaluan traditional outfit and you go out and you say these things. So climate change, that wasn't in my dictionary as an 8-year-old. And then when we got back home, when we were in Fiji, I told the students about what was happening in Tuvalu. When we got back home and we started listening to the stories within our community, and there were certain parts of the island where we would go and play, the beaches, but ever since we would go back and visit the islands, these places no longer exist. Instead of beaches, instead of sand, we have the sea, we have the ocean. And that is within my lifetime, and I am just 25 years old. So that made me realize, and then we have the science and data that tells us, that predicts us, that in 2030, Tuvalu may be submerged. And was it 2030 or 2050? I believe 2050, right? I'm sorry about that, 2050. And how many more years do we have to go? So these facts, and then we have things happening in our community. That's what really pushes me, because why aren't people reacting? I was really surprised. The countries who are responsible for the things that are happening in our homes, at our homes, why aren't they doing anything about it? Why do we have to come to these spaces to tell you what's happening? You should come over to the Pacific and see what's happening so that you can actually experience these things face to face. And I believe, thank you. I believe when you see these things face to face, I believe when you live these experiences, that is what is going to push you and drive you into these spaces and have really sensitive and emotional conversations. But these conversations need to happen, because if it doesn't, how would you know? And how would we gain international solidarity?
Actually, though, and I just actually want to, hands up to the audience, who has a child? Just put your hands up. And is this something that they're facing, seeing as a young person, and what that sort of means to them? I want to also ask out, is anyone seeing changes in where they call home, in their backyard? Yeah, thank you. And I think that's sort of that sense of the more that we can see this, it's that sort of coming together. It's like we have that responsibility now. We have an obligation. Especially if we have the means to do it, because there are regional and remote communities that don't have the infrastructure to maybe transition. So people in cities, people in more developed areas need to work harder, need to work and stand in solidarity, because I think it's just because I hate the word resilience. Why do we have to be resilient? Why can't, developed countries like Australia just stop polluting? And grapple with that, there's some difficulties for, through these mechanisms. I was like, but at what cost? It's human life cost. It's those on the front lines cost, so that you can still maybe benefit whatever it is that you want to benefit from. I digress there. Let's go. Mama Lala, what about you? What was that turning point and realization for you?
Okay. Well, my first experience when I heard the word global warming, I was 16 years old. We were traveling to another island, and my parents told us that these soft corals went white, and they didn't know what caused it. But then my father knew about it, so that's when I get taught that word, and then I study over the years, and then when you're 17 years old in Australia, they ask you your path. When you finish school, you go to work. So I wanted to go work in the mines. And I raised that with my parents. I told my mom and dad, I was like, I want to go work in the mines and be a tugboat driver. I don't know why, but then my mom told me something that I remember. she told me, how would I feel if an Aboriginal person came to my island and did mining there? Because I was going to Australia. That's Aboriginal people land, First People. And it made me think, because cultural upbringing for especially Indigenous people, we obey our parents. And I didn't want to do it because I knew culturally I could disobey my parents and the ancestors go punish me. So I stopped, and then that's how I get full into being a fisherman. And then all through my fisherman life, being a young fisherman before I had my daughter, I saw the reef and the season change because I knew those cultural knowledge from my father, who was also a fisherman, and my brother. It changed it, but I didn't know how to voice them thing until a couple of years ago, when my daughter was 3 years old. My father told me and my sister we can't drink the rainwater from our tanks, because he chose his garden over his grandkids and said, go to the shop and buy rainwater. That was in 2016. We had a drought in the Torres Strait. I don't know if somebody remember, but I know because I was there. And my dad told me, go to the shop and buy the water, because this water in the rain tank is for the garden. It's for the cassava, the bananas, the sweet potatoes, and all the food. And then me and my sister questioned ourselves, like, why is Dad choosing his grandchildren over the gardens? And then my father told me that we are gardening like gardeners. We must continue our cultivation practices because we lived with the land and we understand the land and we look after the land because the land is our mother. And that's how it really make me think there. And that's how I'm a language worker, so I teach my language. My language was class endangered in 2019. I follow on from my father as a language teacher. And one of the things that I experienced as a language worker is trying to preserve our language while fighting climate change at the same time, because our season and our animals are not working according to how our knowledge knows. So I'm facing giants to both sides. And as a mother, I want one day my daughter to bury umbilical cord child on my country, because that's how my parents did it. When my mom had me, my umbilical cord fall out, they buried it to make our mark that we belong to the land. And then if our land get washed away, then my daughter never go put that on there. And will have to be displaced from my own land. So that's why I take this work serious for my people. It both on my language preservation side, my cultural side, and putting that right path for my daughter and the future ancestors are coming behind us. So wow, that's my story there for our mom.
Wow, eso for that, Mama Lala. Like, it's the reminder of the knowledges that are held here in those communities and that really deep connection. And when you just like take off your shoes and you just put your feet into the earth, into the ocean, or into the grass. I'm so basic, but you just feel really grounded. There's something about that touch that makes you feel so deeply connected. And I think that just hearing from all of you is just that, you know, we are so touched in so many ways into our you know, environments. And you know, it's just really important, I guess, why we're here. And so thank you. And, you know, Sissy, Tiana, I've known you, gosh, we met in the walls at Glasgow and you were very young then. I feel like I've aged a bit. I've definitely aged. We've aged. And so I guess I sort of, with that, seeing you as a young person, you inspired me to see you bring and where your values and your heart was really new and gave me and encouraged me to give that and empower that self-determination within these sort of global spaces. And so what was that turning point for you? Because Glasgow wasn't your first COP.
Yeah, I think my story is not unique and not dissimilar to what happens across the Pacific, but where my brother and my grandmother lay was slipping away, and so our koiwi, the bones of our ancestors, were slipping into the river, and we were having to fundraise to excavate our ancestors and relocate them. And so a group of us took that to the UN because our country had endorse the rights of Indigenous peoples, to take that plight. Also, as Māori, we are the taina to the Pacific. We are the younger sibling to our South Pacific Islanders, to Tuvalu, to Torres Strait. So what is our obligation to whakamana, to uplift and empower the struggles that has been happening across the Pacific, but also how can we flip the narrative that we come here and we enter into these really deficit-inducing spaces and work together and uplift the voices and come from a really strengths-based approach, work together and show that we're united. And I think that's really the strength of the Pacific, is that because of the shared genealogy between all of us, we work together. The Pacific's been leading all of the climate wins that we've had historically, 1.5, the ICJ, the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty, the Torres Strait 8, the first case to go to the courts. You know, like, these are all wins that have been won by Pacific people. So we come to these places not from a place of using them for pain, but as a place of strength, as a place to look after our future generations, to look after those that came before us, and to look after our current generations.
I mean, yes, unreal. Also real. And I think just reflecting and hearing you here, like, that's something new I completely forgot, that your brother, like, through that excavating your, other bones in your communities. You just took me back to sort of, I guess, with the win from the Torres Strait 8, was that, it took my turning point of I'm now up to the third grandparent picking up bones like seashells off the beach. How can we be doing and feeling and seeing this? It's a disrespect to our community. It's just a disrespect to our ancestors. And to pick their bones up like that, bare naked, is just such a... we have ways in our culture that doesn't... that looks at that as just really unforgiving and just also really hurtful. And I think that sort of, now I want to get your perspectives of, like, we're sort of facing, and I think coming back to you, Mama Lola, all of these different challenges. And so I called it sort of like polycrisis, because there's so many things that are happening to us that are impacting our communities, but are so interconnected and weave together. So maybe coming back to you, Grace, like, how do you interpret that concept? And especially, I guess, with the lens of back home, seeing that and feeling that, Tuvalu is so on the front lines, and we've been seeing their incredible leadership through this, and love and power in this space. And so, how does that connect, and how do you sort of relate to keep doing the work that you're doing, and maybe some of the challenges your community faces because of those different areas?
Okay. Thank you, Trish. Sorry, Tish. I'm so sorry. There's someone back at home called Trish as well. I think for your question, I sort of lost you a little bit because I was also thinking. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things happening back home. I wasn't clear,
so it's okay.
No, it's my fault. So back at home, I don't think I explained. I bet you all see what's happening in Tuvalu through, the news, and I don't like how they paint us in such a desperate situation, because as we've mentioned in so many of our speaking events, we're working together. We're collectively working together, finding ways when it shouldn't actually be us finding those ways, It should be the other way around, as I've mentioned before. But, the government is working on so many things. We've got the Falepili Union Treaty. Our people are already discussing on Plan B, basically. And as a young person, and from Tuvalu, who loves my culture, my identity, being stripped of our land, being taken away from our land, that is not what I want. And that is not what my grandparents want, and that's not what I want for my kids. But already we're having these, again, sensitive discussions to make sure that we have a place, sorry, I shouldn't call it like that, but just a land for our people. So our government is already negotiating these things. The Falepili Union Treaty with the Australia, with the country Australia. And back at home, that doesn't put us in a way that we've given up. No, we have not. That is Plan Z. We're working on so many things back home. Our youths are very active back at home, working on adaptation, locally led adaptation programs. We're working on restoring corals. And we're working together with the community, with the youths. We have cleanup campaigns. It's these little things because we don't even have an easy access to climate finance. Crazy. To have these programs be done at home, And so it's everything that we do back home that matters, every single thing. Having having lessons within our homes about our values, about our culture, from the tupunas to the mothers and then to their kids. Having that discussion back at home, how to care for the environment, and then we head out and we do those things. We look after our environment. So, it's every little thing that matters back home to ensure that we protect our homes. And this, me being here, us being here, being advocates, is what we can do in our capacity. And so, I don't know how to fully put it all, but currently the existential threat that we're facing in Tuvalu is climate change. And that's one of the priorities that we've set out in our everyday lives. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I'll just leave it there for now.
No, thank you. And look, let's be honest, I really wasn't clear on the question. But you said that so beautifully, and I think it's just a reminder of community-led, mobilization, community organizing, not just in one area, but in all different areas, in all communities, bringing everyone along. And, we need all of you to be a part of that journey. It shouldn't be tiny islands leading this. It should be all of us leading and stepping up. And so, I want to pass it to you, Mama Lola, because I sort of, that intersection of sort of that education, I guess because climate is at the center, you've shared a bit about health and housing, and sort of those sort of impacts that, that I guess that nexus point with climate has really impacted you. And so I guess what I really am sort of wanting to get from everyone is understanding the justice part. People still don't understand what justice means. And I really just I'm hoping and grateful for everyone opening up their hearts and listening here. But I'd love for Mama Lola you to share, I guess, what are some of those other challenges that you're facing in your community on top of climate?
Okay, well, as Tishiko mentioned, climate change is everything. It's not all about sea level rise, the world getting hot. It links to health issues, environmental health issues, and housing, for example. I still live in a 26-year-old house, multi-generation house. There's 60, 80 years between the oldest person and the youngest person. And we still don't have houses built for our young people. So our young people leave the island. They go to the mainland to pursue better life, educate themselves. Me as a Torres Strait Islander, Erubam, from Erub, I don't want to move to the mainland because that's not my country. That's Aboriginal people country. And in respect, I want to stay on my country. So I face housing issues all through Torres Strait, not only me, everyone. People elderly people that have cultural knowledge, they have to move to the mainland because they diagnosed with some illness because I don't know what happened there. There's no money for facilities for islanders to live on the island. So they move to the mainland. When they go to the mainland, they take the cultural knowledge, everything with them, and then they leave us. But then there's technology. We use technology for transmit cultural knowledge, but it's different from being physically there. So we go through this phase where our children have to suffer now. We went through that phase at small, medium, probably halfway suffer. Now they have to suffer. Who knows what's going to happen for their children like me? Couple of years' time, probably a decade time, my daughter could be legal age. The one thing I told her is that when you turn 18, you go to the mainland. It's your choice because we can look now that you got no change happen. But if you want to stay on country, you stay here with me. So he put us in this situation where we are telling our children to leave because there's nothing there for them. So it's not only the sea level rise, a health issue. Me as a dark person, I can't last out on the boat long because the sun is stinging my skin. And skinny peel. When I was 6 years old, I never got that problem with me. Now skinny peel over time with us. We got heat waves, they happen. Right now on my island, I'm getting videos from my cousin. He got destructive weather happen, rain. This season, got rain happen. He got all kind of thing happen, and people don't realize the people that doing the damage, because we're not the one doing the damage. It's others that doing the damage, and we have to cop it. Like in the plenary thing that we've been, the rich do the damage, and the poor have to suffer, like me.
Absolutely. It's like what happens over here will impact over here. So what we do, it's like conscious of how we're deeply connected, but also like, the challenges that we also face. Like, I know 26 years may not be old, but when you have monsoonal season every year, you grow asbestos and molds, and when there isn't infrastructure to increase housing, you have more than one families, and while that is something in our culture of generational living, it shouldn't be overhousing. And so we face these challenges that we don't even have, in a developed nation. We still struggle to have the appropriate, housing for Indigenous people in so-called Australia. Sorry, that came out loud. And so, I just want to acknowledge that and sort of the challenges that regional and remote areas, whether they're island nations or whether they're on mainlands, really struggle, with this. And how that sort of impacts when climate is adding onto that. I want to pass it over to you, Sissy Tiana. Yeah. Sorry, I was like, yeah, maybe, we've had some of these discussions of like the different impacts with climate at the heart of this. But maybe what are some of the risks you see from these overlapping crises, like biodiversity loss, like water scarcity, and extreme weather events?
I think, honestly, all of those risks come down to it's not lost on me that we're sitting in the Australian pavilion right now. Australia is the largest producer of fossil fuels in the Commonwealth. A seventh of what Australia spends on fossil fuel subsidies could fund the renewable energy of 8 Pacific Island nations. A couple of weeks ago, Australia said yes to 3 new coal mines. It has over 100 new fossil fuel projects in the pipeline for the next couple of years. All of the polycrises that we face and that our governments, Australia and New Zealand, purport to be leaders on, isn't the case when they go and do these things, when they quite literally sign the death sentence of our peoples because of it. So the risk is the intersection of all of these things. People say that climate change is the nuclear, our ex-Prime Minister said that climate change is the nuclear issue of our generation. But so is biodiversity loss, so is water scarcity, so is like the bursting of the planetary boundaries that we live in. Yeah.
Absolutely, and we're all, we've sort of seen like some of the data that's come out. Like people are really feeling like we've had one of the hottest year. We've had the hottest year this year. We're seeing more flash floodings and fires that are happening in spaces that people have not seen before. And so, I think with all of this, it's that connection that it does connect to conservation, to biodiversity. When we had the 2019 bushfires, we had our biodiversity loss of our native species was shame. It was such a shame space for it because they're our totems. They're our stories. You are literally burning who we are. And so I actually want to keep it with you, Tiana. to sort of maybe now as we think why we're here in this COP and one of the biggest conversations of climate finance, which for Tuvalu to be on the front lines are having, as a developing nation or a small island developing nation, having, challenges to access some of these resources. How do you feel Indigenous voices are or aren't represented in policy decisions right now about climate change?
I've been coming to these for a while now, and it's riding the ebbs and flows, highs and lows. We've been advocating for the inclusion of Indigenous rights, human rights within Article 6, within all of the rule books of the Paris Agreement. And some days it isn't, and some days it is. And quite often, because of what we see, we've realized that we have to work together outside of spaces like these. So we actually come to spaces like this so that we can work together. There's amazing work being done across the Pacific to ensure that climate finance will go to non-economic loss and damage, to the revival of our languages, cultures, lands, and peoples. As Grace was saying, to ensure that should something happen to our island homes, there's places for our people to go. How do we build collective strength? I just spent 2 weeks on Masig. That wouldn't have come had I not come to these spaces. So actually coming to these spaces is a place where we can move from a place of strength and unify our people together. I just came from a conversation with some native Brazilian people, and it was really emotional, and I left that and I was like, we are one heart. That is the strength of what we bring to this movement, and that is what we have to offer. We have to offer that we're one beating heart, that their lungs, the Amazon, and our lungs, the ocean, work together to sustain human life.
And yeah, absolute, big round of applause for that one, because I think in past, just over the last couple of days, I've heard the question of, especially here, of what can Australia, what does an Australian Pacific COP look like? And I think taking a step back, especially when you ask that question to young Indigenous people, young Pacifica leaders, young Māori leaders, we've been building these connections and relationships for millennia because our ancestors did it. We are only here because of the footprints that have gone before us to lead this way of what strengthening those relationships are. So when you ask that question, you need to really think about what are you doing to connect to those Indigenous people, to your land, and how can you learn those lessons? Because that's what we need, more of this knowledge and expertise really embedded in these frameworks. And I think when I asked that question, I was thinking about the 6.2 and 6.4 mechanisms right now in the last since the beginning, since yesterday, just after the LDOT coming out, there's what can we do to sort of ensure that it meets what is required to support those communities on the front lines. And I think about the importance of why we must have these knowledges and expertise in the room and a part of these conversations, and especially young people. And so I want to pivot now as we sort of near this conversation, and just to let you know, we will have Q&A, but I want to maybe finish it off with Grace, with, how can, I guess, through this space now, as we weave in the next couple of weeks, how can climate finance mechanisms be restructured as we do think about refining what those frameworks are, or enhanced to directly support island communities that are on the front lines and bearing the brunt of these disproportionate impacts, or support Indigenous-led climate justice initiatives, ensuring equitable access and active participation of youth in decision-making process. Another big question for you, my girl.
Thank you. Raftai. Well, to be honest, I am not a youth negotiator. I am not in the rooms looking at the articles and negotiating on the finance mechanisms. And so we're just out here in the pavilions finding every help that we can get. And one of them is, well, the initiative that I'm in is Rising Nations Initiative, and it is under the Global Center for Climate Mobility. And it is with these partnerships that we have with people who are helping us in this fight. That's where we're able to get funds. Sorry, I'll try and answer your question, but I'll just get from what I know. Sorry about that.
No, please do.
And so, I mean, one of the funds that have been in our interest, in the Pacific interest, is the Loss and Damage Fund. And the Loss and Damage Fund has been an ongoing discussion for the past 20 years. And then just 2 years ago, or I believe a year ago, they started talking about funds, about countries who have pledged to actually put funds into the Loss and Damage Fund. My question to the audience, have we seen any funds in that Loss and Damage Fund? Yes or no? Small amount, yes. Small amount that I believe, if you equate it to the things that are happening in our countries, it isn't enough, right? I wish there was a formula that we could put into the systems so that it sorry if I'm putting things in a bad light. It could get to the countries who are contributing the most to the situation and then equate it to the amount of dollars that they owe to us. How amazing would that be? So that we could go up to them and say, pay up, pay up.
Literally pay up.
Our time is running out. Why would people talk about Loss and Damage Fund, pledge to put things in there, and we haven't seen anything? And so my next question would be, I mean, I'm answering this question, 4 questions, because I don't see anything happening back at home. How many more cops, how many more things do we have to go through to actually see these pledges working within our communities, doing things back at home, making changes in our homes? I don't know.
I mean, and you are all young, and it's defeating. Like, here we are having these conversations, and they've inherited a responsibility to be in these spaces, to show up for their community, to have these discussions. The fact of the matter is we need to double down our impacts, because we are less than 5 years of a critical decade. And you are hearing, and you're hearing from these these speakers what they're feeling and what they're seeing, and I think it goes back to that responsibility of, how we will be good stewards for the place that we live on, and recognize, who that land belongs to, and think about respecting and being reciprocal, and giving back to our natural spaces. It's really hard to, I guess, have that conversation, because you're right. We're now at the 29th session of this, of a climate conference, and we continue to hear false solutions. Like, stop. I was about to swear then, wow. I was like, it's all talk. We need real action. That's really what we need. And so, okay, with that all, and we have a full audience member, and I love it, audience membership. So do we have any questions out there? We've got 5 minutes left, and I would love for you to take this opportunity to ask these incredible young leaders, some questions that might be really burning for you. But if not, we will be on the side for further conversations, if you would like. But we have Ollie here, roaming around with the mic. Can I get some hands up? You. Yes. Maybe one. Let's keep it basic.
It's working. Hi. Thank you so much for your evidence and for your stories. My name is Karina Hirsch. I work for the Margaret Pike Trust, which is an NGO that works at the intersection of women and girls' health and rights, climate resilience, and biodiversity conservation. So I really found your interventions super important, and I wish you were in the plenary. These spaces are important, but the plenary is really what the negotiators need to see. They need to see what the face of climate change looks like, and we know that's the face of a woman or a girl. I have 2 questions. One specifically to you. You mentioned some of the financial mechanisms that you are either advocating for or to be used to rebuild the people's homes. But can you maybe just share a little bit more about what some of those financial mechanisms are so that we know as a civil society community, you know, where should we perhaps be targeting some efforts to influence those mechanisms? And two, second question is around health. Obviously, the climate crisis is a gender and a health crisis as well for exactly the types of people that you spoke about today. What are you doing in your communities to see and working with other civil society actors to get health and considerations, especially around women's and girls' health, their reproductive health, into your national adaptation plans and other national climate policies? Thank you so much.
Huge, but maybe I'll start with you, Sister Tiana, because I think that first one, I guess it wasn't climate finance, but you share your experience of fundraising for that.
I'm going to tell you to tap the shoulder of the guy next to you in green, and he will tell you all about the mechanism they've just created in the Pacific, which is a movement to move climate finance funding directly to local communities and advocacy for the people like us that are up here. Yeah.
And your second question?
And I guess, do you want to talk to the health one? Can you repeat about the health just like intersection, sorry?
I'm going to say, as you know, like the climate crisis intersects with a health crisis and a gender justice crisis. So I was just wondering, are you doing any advocacy around integrating health considerations, especially the health of women and girls, into your national climate policies, whether that's the development of a health NAP or other national climate policies? Are you advocating for women's and girls' health in particular as a part of that?
So firstly, are you part of conversations like the DQ Advisory Committee? If you want to share about that, and I guess sort of like how you're influencing change with local government. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, just sort of reframing that
Sorry,
question.
I'm using English that I don't use in my everyday conversation. English is my third language. But not at the moment, but I hope one day we do that because women health, you like to say women and girls' health is really important, especially in the community, as Tish mentioned, with the housing situation for health situation in the Torres Strait, like them houses are old and they have moles. Even our schools have moles in it. Any affect children, the breathing vulnerabilities, and recently they have like high numbers of our children having asthmatic now. We never have that before in our lives. We don't even have that in our family. So I hope one day like I get there like part of the conversation for our people, because women health, children health, elders health is important. But like you say, women is the one that produce children. As the earth is our mother, we have to look after our women and our little girls, because they are the ones that could produce the next generation, hold the next generation with them. Well, so yeah, I don't know if I answer your question.
Do you both want to answer that question, or?
I think I'll try and take on your question. Sorry. That was very well done. In Tuvalu, from my experience in Tuvalu, we grew up in a community where, because everyone lives together, community ties and values, that there's sort of a hierarchy, a structure within our families. So we have the the Pacific, I think it's in every Pacific and Oceania families. It's the men, the women, and the children. And so in our community, we have the elders, and then we have the women and the youth. The women and the youth are sort of the hands and the arms of the decisions that are made by men, by the elders. But that is slowly changing over time. And we see that because we now have two women NGOs in Tuvalu. One is called the Tuvalu National Council of Women, and then now we have the Fatule organization. So these two councils in Tuvalu look after the health, and not just physical health, but the mental health of women and girls in the country. And they're very much involved in the discussions when we have in Tuvalu, whether it be development discussions, projects. They are always invited to these discussions, that they branch it out to the younger girls that they see in the community who are making changes. So we are very much involved in these conversations. I hope that answers your question from Tuvalu. Haftai.
Thank you for that. And I think just to add on to that is that there are, different people in this space that have that sort of health lens and expertise and knowledge that are in these rooms and spaces that can talk more into that and how they're contributing to, national plans and frameworks. But I think that's also something that we also grapple with, of like cultural hierarchy in this space, and something that a lot of communities will have to sort of consult, which is why it's so important and a reminder of working together with people that are on the front lines and of impacts and on the ground. And so thank you so much for, really sharing your mana. I guess, we're at 5 o'clock and they're going to kick us off the stage. I really want everyone to give a round of applause to our incredible speakers. But before you all leave, because I guess maybe this is the grassroots person in me, I want you to repeat after me. When I say we are rising, I want you all to say like the ocean. We are rising. Like the ocean. We are rising. Like the ocean. We are rising. Like the ocean. Eso. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you for coming.